With the Umbaran shield defenses down, their outpost was ripe for the taking. Their forces stationed around it still proved a threat, but Commander Bligh could sense that victory was within his grasp. The broken flank had been fixed, and Rex had successfully returned to base where Bligh had set up for the next step. With the second wave of clones having landed, his army was restocked with men and high morale. The plan was to encircle the outpost to give the Umbarans no breathing space. Bligh realized that what armor they still had, they would use in a protective position to hold out as long as possible. He sent several ATTEs around to attack their position from all sides, but in the meantime, infantry and light armor were supposed to clear out the nearby forest. A forest that was hostile in and of itself to anyone who did not pay attention. There were many clones from the first wave who wanted to get to the front line as well. They felt it was their deserved reward to see this through to the end, and Rex told Bligh he wanted a piece of the action too. But Bligh convinced Rex to be patient, as he would be needed soon for another mission. The battle surrounding the outposts heated up. Small fighters managed to find openings to attack without coming in range of enemy AA. The few Umbarans who were still in the outskirts engaged with the clones, managing to ramp up casualties to those who could not be reinforced quick enough. Some of the clones started to realize victory might not be as easy as anticipated. Umbaran fighters now started to engage with theirs, and though the infantry was vastly outnumbered and cornered, there was a certain aggressiveness to their fighting similar to that of a wounded animal. They had nothing to lose, meaning that their actions were bolder. Nevertheless, Bligh continued to send in more troops and hold until all heavy walkers were in position. At Coruscant, the matter brought to light by Maximilian Veers needed discreet discussing among some of the Jedi Council's highest members. If word were to come out that Jedi and Imperial officials had met, it would mean outrage all around the galaxy. With the CIS plan to start a war to cripple supply lines and reinforcements, all agreed that action needed to be taken. Ki-Adi-Mundi pledged for an attack on Utapau as the recent droid invasion had led the planet to capitulate. Liberating the locals could win their favor in the aid of the war, and a possibility to build more cloning facilities near enemy systems. The others agreed it would indeed be an attack that would be seen as justified by public relations. Kit Fisto did bring to attention that one should not scatter the clone armies too much all over the place. If either the Separatists, Mandalorians, or Imperials managed to pull off a successful attack at one of their existing facilities, the consequences would be grave. Yoda agreed, and said that besides the invasion of Utapau, they should also station more men at defensive positions for their facilities. He handed the task of setting up defenses to Luminara Unduli, and he requested Qui-Gon Jinn and his former student Obi-Wan Kenobi to lead the attacks on Utapau. Once they left, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Mace Windu, and Yoda stayed to discuss another, more sensitive matter. The notion of Plan JS-13 had been uttered more and more over time as an anti-sympathy towards the Imperials rose. Yoda insisted it should never be executed, as the consequences would be felt all over the galaxy. He urged Mace Windu and Mundi to keep an eye and ear out for whenever this topic gets discussed. It will no doubt be brought up again in upcoming Jedi Council meetings, and for now, all three agree that even though using it would be unwise, holding onto it and guarding it safely was better than it landing into the hands of those willing to use it. On the planet of Sullust, something unforeseen to the rebels occurred. Giant egos were not only found in the army of the Empire, but elsewhere all the same. A young prominent rebel by the name of Blau was one of the officers tasked earlier with the assignment to retrieve an Imperial AT-AT with the documents provided by the clones. Many attempts failed, and with the recent success on Scarif, all rebel forces who were tasked with this mission were called to come back to Yavin. But Blau's squad was so close to achieving his goal that Blau's ego got the best of him. The sudden strike on Scarif meant an increase and migration of Imperial units at several bases. Even though some of Blau's men argued to head back, Blau was hard-headed and urged on the attack of the AT-ATs stationed at the base. The rebels would think highly of them if they managed to bring even more walkers back to their home base. But with the increased security, the attack was a failure, and Blau lay dead as one of the first to die, leaving behind his men without a proper alternative plan. The Imperials mounted their heavy walkers in order to stomp this petty attempt into the ground, and sent in several TIEs to destroy their frigates and few fighters they possessed. Word of Blau's death had not reached most of the rebels yet, meaning that they still moved forward to press on the attack without a knowledge of the incoming walkers. It did not end well for those who arrived first. The same went for the X-Wings and A-Wings as they started to engage with the Imperial TIE fighters. The stormtroopers pressed on the attack, picking off rebel targets at a rapid pace. The rebel soldiers started to notice something was off. Those fighting in the air had no time to pay attention to what was happening on the ground. Fierce duels among the pilots resulted in wins and losses on both sides. Communications were scrambled. The rebels did not know who was in charge, as Blau's second-in-command was unresponsive as well. Some rebels tried to flee inside the Imperial base to seek cover from the AT-AT. Now and then, one of the fighters flew over to fire at the walker, but its shields were too strong to be damaged by them. The white armor of the stormtroopers made them clearly visible for rebel snipers who held back their position safe from the walkers. The Imperials were nearing the hangar, and it was clear for the rebels that they needed to fall back. Star Destroyers had set up formation to block the rebels from escaping, as more and more rebel fighters were shot down. It started to become clear to the pilots as well that the battle was lost. But with the communications being scrambled by the Imperials, the rebels' right flank was not yet aware of the retreat made by the others. Though they were surprised to see the operational walkers, they pushed on. Instead of posing as easy targets outside, some headed through the halls of the base to either retreat or link up with the others. It was chaos. With their communications broken, it was every man for himself. Now the right flank also realized that retreat was imminent, as they lost many to the deadly blasters of the AT-AT. Those in front of the walkers were like sitting ducks. There was barely any cover hiding one's position from the towering behemoths. The Imperials secured more and more ground as they rooted out the enemy one by one. Though most were unlucky, a few slipped through the deadly attempts of the AT-ATs and disappeared into Sullust nook and crevices. Further back, the fight between infantry still raged on, as there was a divide amongst the rebels on retreating from the walkers or towards it. Though towards might seem like suicide, they are not mobile enough to quickly turn if one does manage to get past them. But the immense size of the walkers intimidated even the bravest soldiers, leading up to more defeat. Nevertheless, there were a few cunning enough to escape this way. They needed to find an alternate route to their evac, but at least the AT-AT was not their problem anymore. The Imperials felt that victory was close. No one knew what was going on. There were those who chose to fight, and those who chose to flee. Yet they did not know if their evac point was still secure. The stormtroopers got the order to push even harder. They headed into the hallways as well to root out any scared rebels who did not dare to emerge from inside. Blau's arrogance got many good men killed that day. The cornered rebels did manage to hold their position from incoming enemy infantry, but it was only a matter of time before they came into the firing zone of the walkers. A rebel pilot in a T-47 airspeeder did one desperate attempt to take out the walker by crippling its legs, but it was too much collateral damage for them to pull it off. Only a handful of rebels were left, and they desperately ran, but did not get far. The AT-ATs had great oversight, and the few pilots left tried to escape into orbit. Though a small number succeeded, most were destroyed by the TIE fighters. The Imperial troops secured the base. The majority of the work for their walkers was over, as now the enemies remaining needed to be hunted down by infantry. Qui-Gon Jinn and Kenobi's fleet had arrived above Utapau. The Separatists had set up a blockade of deadly dreadnoughts and frigates, but the Republic attacked them from all sides. It was a grand display. Giant explosions and fire lit up the ever-so-dark void of the galaxy, as fighters and bombers danced around each other to silence the other for good. Both sides lost heavy cruisers, and the Republic prepared for another wave of fighters to make way for a bombing run. The fighters already entangled in the battle were agile and difficult to spot. The frigates of both factions had difficulty locking on target, but luckily their shields were strong against their blasters. The CIS fleet positioned at Utapau was massive, but the Republic just needed to create an opening to start sending in troops on the surface. The signal was given to the fighters to commence the attack, and many followed their groups to designated targets. A Venator was heavily damaged, and on the brink of being destroyed. It would be a loss heavily felt by the Republic, and in return, the pilots would need to repay the favor. They received the message that the bombing squadrons were aligned and approaching the main combat zone to which the opening would be created. It was near a separatist space station that had already taken a pounding during the initial attack by the clones. Their fighters aimed for different ships to give the bombers as much room as they needed with the help of their torpedoes and rockets. The Venator that was damaged received the order to retreat and save what could be saved. For many inside, it would be their tomb. The bombers signaled that they began their attack run on the droid's control ships as they dove down in preparation. This was it. The fighters were told to keep enemies off the backs of their bombers. The first volley damaged the droid ship immensely, but it was too big to be taken down in one bombing run. The clone pilots would need to make at least one more turn in order to cripple it, let alone take it down. The pressure by the clones could be felt by Separatist forces, as some of their bigger ships tried to retreat to link up with the rest of the fleet further out. But the clones were still making losses, as acclimators were burning up as well, as they tried to head into position to pull through to Utapau's surface. It was still total chaos, and another Venator was taking a heavy beating as the droid's control ships focused all its fire on the larger Republic units. The bombers were in position for another bombing run, this time with less units as some got hunted down by enemy fighters. They still managed to damage the ship's right side with a powerful volley, and it was clear that it would not take much to take it out now. During this second run, more bombers were lost. Fire was erupting from the control ship, and alarms rang as escape pods and smaller transports evacuated from within. The ships surrounding the control unit tried to retreat, but the Republic did not give them any chance or opening. And then finally, the huge ship was torn into 1,000 pieces, creating the desired opening within their fleet to send in the first troops to liberate Utapau. The space battle had not yet been won, but at least the Republic could secure this position and set up defenses for an enemy counterattack. Back on Umbaran, the clones found themselves at the edge of the Umbaran outpost. It was as Bly expected, as hundreds of soldiers were cropped up to hold out. They had little cover, but instead, a massive mobile heavy cannon loomed over them, firing at the clones. The clones had strict orders not to engage the giant walker, but instead hold out and prevent the Umbarans from retreating or pushing forward. With so many ATTEs incoming, even this massive cannon should prove no problem. But the walkers needed more time, and with every passing minute, more clones were picked off who came out of cover. The clones in their turn wound up casualties on the enemy's side, but the massive blue soldiers barely seemed to diminish by their actions. Some were scared, but the officers convinced them that all they needed to do was hold out. The cavalry would wipe them out with ease. The Umbarans also had regular tanks stationed around the mobile cannon, but though their blasts were dangerous, they were not accurate enough to hit precise targets like the individual clone soldiers. Most deaths on the clone side were due to infantry fire and the two smaller turrets at the front of the heavy cannon. When Bly received the news that all ATTEs were in position around the outpost, he ordered an all-out assault from all sides. From the front, 4 ATTEs emerged from the dark forest, accompanied by more reinforcing infantry. The main cannons immediately targeted the mobile heavy cannon, while the front cannons targeted enemy soldiers. From the back and sides, 4 more ATTEs approached the camp to avoid anyone from fleeing or flanking. Though there were tanks positioned in those directions, they stood no chance against the mighty walkers. The ATTEs brought in by the clones were easy targets for the heavy cannon, but they got hit from all sides by half a dozen walkers at the same time. Even for a large machine like that, it would not take long before it would crumble, and before they knew it, their massive unit that was meant to be their secret ace of their sleeve was destroyed. Panic broke out amongst the Umbarans, as in mere seconds, their smaller tanks got bested as well, as their shields were no match for the advancing enemy. The clones were ecstatic. They followed their walkers in great numbers and started to spread out around the outpost to fight off stragglers who went inside the buildings. The camp was burning, and the bodies everywhere displayed the victory achieved by the clones. In order to capture and claim these grounds, the leftovers needed to be taken care of. Though most got taken out quickly or surrendered, at one of the buildings an elite unit managed to still put up some resistance to the clones who first entered. But they had nowhere else to run, and eventually, the clones finished their petty skirmish. With the outpost in clone hands, Bly ordered all units to march in and set up a clone base to get the wounded out and start landing more units and vehicles at a secure location. Plans needed to be made for the next step, as now the clones would advance further into Umbaran.